Story of a king's son and a maid's son who were exchanged. After Sabbath of the Torah portion of Noach 5570, Motzei Shabbos, Parashat Noach 5570, which would be the year 1809, around October time. A tale. Once there was a king. In his home there was a bondmaid who served the queen. The time came when the queen was supposed to have a child, and the bondmaid had to give birth at that time as well. The nanny, or the midwife, went and switched the infants to see what would happen, what would arise from this. So she took the king's child and put him down next to the bondmaid, and the bondmaid's son she placed next to the queen. Afterwards, the children began to grow up, and the king's son, the child who grew up at the king's, whom they thought was the king's son, they raised. They made great. And lifted him up higher and higher until he became extremely big. And he became a behemoth, a large beria. And the bondmaid's son, who was a large bria, and the bondmaid's son, he who was reared by the bondmaid, who in truth was the king's son, also grew up at the maid's. Both children studied together in one schoolroom. And the king's true son, who shall be called the bondmaid's son, his nature was drawn to the manners of royalty, except that he was brought up in the home of a servant. Conversely, the bondmaid's son, who shall be called the king's son, his nature was drawn to in a different way, not like the bearing of the king, except that he was brought up in the king's home, so he had to act according to the manners of a royal person, because those were the manners they brought him up with. Now, the nanny could not hold herself back and went and spoke out the secret to some person. And that she had exchanged children. Every person has a friend, and that friend has another friend. Ksubos 109b. Thus one person told the other until the secret was revealed, as the way of the world is, until the world was talking quietly about it, that the king's son was switched. But it was not permissible to speak about it outright, so that the king should not become aware of it. For what will the king be able to do in such a case, since he cannot correct it? For he cannot believe it, as perhaps it is a lie, so how can one reverse the exchange? Therefore, one certainly may not say it out in front of the king. However, amongst themselves, the public talked about it quietly.